Need my sunnies. Ooh, it's actually a little toasty in here with my jacket on. I could probably take that off. Hello friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. I have just finished with work for the day. I'm sitting in the parking lot at work and we're gonna go to the bookstore. So I figured we could do that together. It is the release day for the new Hunger Games book, and that's our book club book for March. So I don't have very many days to read it because it's, you know, like a new release in the middle of the month. And then I thought I could get the April book pick as well, because I think I'm going to end up liking that one and wanting a physical copy. Plus, like, book shopping sounds so fun right now. So let's head over to Barnes & Noble and do some book shopping. Guys, it's so warm outside. So spoiled. I never go to the bookstore. I haven't been here in forever. There's so many things to look at. I'm surprised that I don't see it down here. I might have to go upstairs. So I'm blind, which is also possible. Should I look for a puzzle while I'm here? I think that would kill me. I definitely think I missed this somewhere. I literally walked right past it. It was at the front door. No, it's not the first book. Now I see book 2, which I have also walked right past. And I can kind of roam and actually look at stuff that I found what I'm looking for. Oh, did I mention I almost went down the escalator the wrong way? That was fun. I could spend forever in Barnes & Noble and be so happy about it. So I got my 2 books. I'm proud of myself. I didn't leave anything in addition beyond this. This is our pick for March for book club, and this is our pick for April for book club. So we're all set for the next 2 months. This is shorter than I expected. This is also shorter than I expected. And I wanted to buy like 800 more things, but I didn't. So I'm proud of myself. And it's like the nicest day. It's so beautiful. So we're gonna go home and let the dogs out. Take them for a walk. I'm sure they'll be so excited to do that. Let's just throw these in my backpack. Maybe, kind of. They're in there enough. Guys, we're not straight, so sorry. I do believe it is time to get into Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I'm a little nervous to read this, considering that I did not like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is quite a bit shorter than Ballad. It looks shorter. 382, it is shorter. Looks like it starts out with some quotes here on this first page. I've heard that she's like, from my friend's words, I did not say this statement, but and to quote them, she's back in her bag for this book. I do feel like we lost the plot a little bit with our last installment into the Hunger Games series, but I always said I would love a Haymitch story, so this is the Haymitch story that I always said I wanted, so I can't be too picky choosy at this point since I did ask for this. All propaganda is lies, even when one is telling the truth. I don't think this matters as long as one knows what one is doing. Truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. Nothing appears more surprising to those who consider human affairs with a philosophical eye than the easiness with which the many are governed by the few, and the implicit submission with which men resign their own sentiments and passions to those of their rulers. When we inquire by what means this wonder is effected, we shall find that as force is always on the side of the governed, the governors have nothing to support them but opinion. It is therefore on opinion only that government is founded, and this maxim extends to the most despotic and most military governments, as well as to the most free and most popular. That the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition, and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. In this book, we follow Haymitch during the 50th quarter quell, and during the 50th quarter quell, we have twice as many contestants from each district going to the capital for the games. So rather than 2 from each district, we have 4. And if you remember from the original Hunger Games, Haymitch does something with a force field, I think. I think something with the force field around the arena is how he wins his games. I can't remember exactly, but let's go ahead and get into this. I'm so nervous because I feel like Sunrise on the Reaping, or no, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was trying to say specific things and just fell really, really short on the things it was trying to say. I don't feel like she delivered the message super well. I think we can extrapolate what the message and the intent was, but I don't think that it was well executed. It was also coming out at a time in our world where I don't think it was saying anything profound. So I did rewatch my vlog and our live show for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And I know there was a lot of songs in that book. And I remember being mildly annoyed by all of the singing. I don't remember there being a whole lot of singing in the original Hunger Games, but there are more songs in here. I don't understand why we have more songs, but we do. And apparently Haymitch is not a drinker. He works at a distillery. He not a formal distillery, but a woman who distills alcohol for the town. And he makes a comment that he's not a drinker, but he'll take the gift because it's his birthday. He is born on Reaping Day, and she gifts him with a bottle of liquor that he's going to barter and trade for things later on. But it's just funny that he's not a drinker because he's an alcoholic when we meet him later. And apparently the girl he loves is a covey. She is of the same group of people, band of people, as... Is her name Lucy Gray? I keep thinking it's Lucy Gray, right? Bard, Lucy Gray Bard. This woman is named Lenore Gray Bard. So that is sticking around, apparently. Cool. Did we get our first confirmed LGBT character ever in the Hunger Games? Clark. What's his name? Clark Carmine. He is part of the Covey, and he watches guardians over Lenore Gray, because she doesn't have parents. That is an interesting development. Ooh, interesting twist. Haymitch was not the original tribute pulled. The kid that was pulled tried to run away and escape during the reaping, and so he got shot in the back of the head. So that's real fun. I feel like it makes sense for anyone to be angry at the Capitol or hate the whole system that's in place here, obviously, as a tribute. But Haymitch specifically, being that he wasn't pulled in the reaping and there was no following the protocol or following the orders in which gets him into the Hunger Games. He's trying to save Lenore Gray, and in the attempt to save Lenore Gray, because she's trying to help the kid that died's mom, because the kid that got shot, the mom is obviously having a meltdown, as one would, seeing their kid's head get blown off. So she's trying to comfort the mom, and she gets in the way, and so Haymitch is then trying to save Lenore Gray, and he runs to her and intercepts this exchange, and they say, well, I guess we have our replacement, because he inserted himself and made himself a part of the scuffle, and they basically rig it to pretend that they're calling his name when they draw out of the bowl, because they're trying to not air the riot that's now happening. So they cut the live feeds, and they're trying to make it seem as if Haymitch's name was always getting pulled from the bowl. So I mean, I get I feel like that paints a really nice starting point, starting picture for who Haymitch becomes, because that is so not fair. None of it is fair, but that is deeply unfair. It's just also manufactured, which I know we know, but they mention that over the live feed, he begins to clap and I hear a huge audience response over the speakers, although I can only see a handful of people applauding in 12. So they're making it seem as if there's more applause and support than there actually is for this riot and rigged reaping. We get to mention this is a really hideous angle. I see them cut to Lenora Dove, who has a hand against her mouth. She isn't crying, so Plutarch won't get the tearful goodbye. Not from her and not from me. They will not use our tears for their entertainment. And that is a theme that we see in the Hunger Games. Also Plutarch. Plutarch is in this, which I wasn't expecting. We also have reference to some Everdeen, which we didn't get in the first book. And I remember complaining, like, why don't we see any of the Everdeen ancestry characters? But in this one we do. And I feel like this could possibly be Katniss's dad based on ages, or like an older sibling of Katniss's dad. We're off to a better start already. Well, this is something I totally didn't even think about in terms of like who would have been Haymitch's mentor and who would have like helped him through the games, because we know he wins and then he is the mentor for everything after his quarter quell, or I guess, yeah, quarter quell, half quell, whatever, the 50th anniversary. There we go. I'm like, why does it look like that? District 12 only has had one winner before Haymitch. Our mentors, our guides, our masterminds, our protectors in the Hunger Games. Except the District 12 tributes don't have automatic mentors, not even one, because we're the only district without living victors, and that's who the job traditionally falls to. In 50 years, we've only had one victor, and that was a long time ago. A girl who no one seems to know anything about. Back then, barely anyone in 12 had a television, so the games were mostly hearsay. I've never seen her in the clips of the old shows, but then those early efforts are rarely featured, as they are said to be badly filmed and lacking in spectacle. My parents weren't born yet, and even Mama couldn't tell you much about the girl. I brought our victor up with Lenora Dove a few times, but she never wanted to discuss her. So they get randomly assigned victors from other districts who don't get chosen for their own districts, which makes them pariahs essentially, because how could like a district 2 victor mentor 12 and have 12 win over 2 winning? Like, that would look really bad. I never thought about that. Like the fact that District 12 had no victors until, or no victors, no mentors until this Hunger Games when Haymitch wins. Like, that's just, I don't know, something I never even considered. And then the reasoning that they put behind why the games with Lucy Gray, that's her name, right? I keep saying that, but I'm like not confident that's actually her name, weren't televised is because there's no spectacle. There's no grandeur to it because it was, such a old game. And I don't know, like having to read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, there was spectacle. She created spectacle. She just did it in a way that nobody appreciated. So they're trying to erase history and erase her out of it. Also talk about how they're allowed to bring tokens into the games. And we know, we also got backstory for the Mockingjay pin that Katniss has. It is one of the characters in here, Maisie, who's a twin, Maisie and Merrily. They get twin brooches or pins from someone. Merrily's is a hummingbird and Maisie's is a mockingjay, and she thinks that that is just like an abomination. She's so offended that she was given the mockingjay pin, and so she like locks it in a drawer and never thinks about it again. And it's obviously the same mockingjay pin that we see Katniss get from the Hob, but Haymitch is bringing in a token, which is his like flint striker. Beats are allowed to take one item from their home into the arena with them as long as it's not a weapon. My flint striker could be viewed as an unfair advantage, but I'm not giving them any help with that. And I'm pretty sure that he wins by like there's like fire involved, or like throwing things into the force field, or an axe. Does the flint striker come back around? That's my main question. That's what I was getting at. Like, does that come back into how he ends up winning? Luella dies before they even get into the arena. I didn't even know that was like a thing that could happen. I didn't even know that like the tributes could die in the prep stages going into the arena, and like that was acceptable. Do they replace her? Does somebody else go into the arena instead of Luella? I didn't know that was like a possibility. I will say though, these tributes are handled much more aggressively in the days before the games in comparison to like Katniss's Hunger Games. They are in handcuffs, they're chained. They make a comment that they used to be carted around in like boxcars, and now they're like in nicer train accommodations where they have like beds and food and stuff. They don't have these luxurious apartment complexes the way that we see in Katniss's Hunger Games, and they don't have like the same respect from their team members either. Like no one's they're not really being pampered. They're being given like the basics, non-poverty stricken people. So like they have food, they have showers, they're given clothes, but it's like not well-fitting clothes, and it's not like free will showers. They're being sprayed up, you know, like they're timed and being sprayed at like increments. So it's just very different to see like what happened during Battle of Songbirds and Snakes and how those games were, which obviously is very different from Katniss's games. And like this is like the midpoint, and we see how things are here, which is still not quite like Katniss's games, and like how much more spectacle is added to it even in the next 25 years. Very interesting. I don't know that I was expecting that. Wyrus is one of Haymitch's mentors. That is diabolical. This is one of them. So, excuse me, that means there's at least two. Who's the other? We get to learn a little bit about Wyrus's games and like her arena, and it's an arena full of mirrors, which is very interesting. So people kept like running into things that didn't exist, and they kept like, sounds like running into walls and cracking their heads open and dying because like the mirrors just like reflected everything back at them. And she found a blind spot, and she just sat there for the whole entire games, and they weren't able to like deliver her sponsor gifts because they couldn't coordinate where to drop them. The Victor hover couldn't come and get her. Like she just sat there and just waited and left the arena without a scratch on her. And I feel like that is very Wyrus coded. Away. Oh, I turned the camera off as I kept reading because I don't even know. Oh my gosh, I'm fixing to, oh, it's Mags. The other one is Mags. Of course it's Mags. It's Mags, a Victor from District 4. She looks at me sadly, knowingly, and then opens up her arms and says, "I'm so sorry about Luella, Haymitch." It's very interesting that already Haymitch is like questioning the Capitol and questioning why we accept this fate and why we don't uprise or create rebellions. Like the fear and everything that the Capitol inspires doesn't necessarily justify the Hunger Games. Price that the districts are paying isn't necessarily equal to the crime that was committed. Plutarch is asking like, why do you agree to it? Why do I? For that matter, why have people always agreed to it? Well, it's something to think about. So it's just interesting that already Plutarch, I don't know if I said Haymitch earlier, I meant Plutarch, is planting these seeds, dropping these crumbs, trying to get these people to think about it bigger picture. He just asks them like, why didn't you rebel? Like, why didn't you push the rebellion? Like you've had a couple of instances now when they were doing the reaping, when Luella died and he brought Luella's body to the foot of the mansion, president's mansion, and made him acknowledge her death. Now there's another fight that broke out during training. Like these are all moments that you could have incited something and you chose not to. Why? And Haymitch is like, well, guns, death. And Plutarch's like, but you're going to arena anyway. I don't know, just interesting that this is already Plutarch's mission 25 years before the actual games happens where he incites a rebellion. I feel like every time I turn the freaking camera off, something happens and I'm like, no way. Well, I just had another one of those moments because, what is this kid's name? Ampert says, my father wants to meet you. He's at the booth with the potato. And so then Haymitch heads off in search of a man with a potato. After making a lap around the crowded booths, sure enough, he finds one. As he turns to note the pair of steel-rimmed glasses, while he bears a strong resemblance to Ampert, this is not why he looks familiar. It's Beatty, a Victor from District 3. So now we have Wyrus and Beatty and Mags. This is what I wanted from a prequel. Not about freaking President Snow. This is amazing. I'm having like, Beatty is going to teach Haymitch about potatoes. This makes so much more sense when you like find out later on that Haymitch is involved in this rebellion and has all these friends. Like, yeah, they're all victors, and yes, like they, you know, do things together throughout the next 25 years. But like the fact that they were all involved in this Hunger Games together is what probably sets the stage for that rebellion later. It makes so much more sense and like expands on that idea. And I am just loving it a lot. Also, how cruel of you, Suzanne Collins, to introduce us to Beatty's child, who doesn't win this Hunger Games and thus likely dies. And we have to watch Beatty mentor his child to his death. And you know what? That's cruel. That is cruel. Haymitch in his one-on-one with the head game maker only gets a 1. That's not very good. He was going for unlikable. And it does seem that he achieved that. I just think he achieved it better than he thought he would. I also did some reading last night before going to bed, and I have some other thoughts. President Snow arranges a meeting between Haymitch and himself at Plutarch's family home, and we learn that Snow is 58 in this book. So I think that puts him at like, what, 82 in Katniss's Hunger Games? He arrives like very unwell and vomiting, and Haymitch is like, wow, I get to see weakness in this man. He is just a human. But turns out that he is weak and unwell because he's recovering from a plate of poisoned oysters that he gave to the lead parade guy, and killed him because of what happened with the stunt with the chariots and the firework and Luella dying, and Haymitch bringing Luella's body to the steps of the Capitol, making Snow like look at it. He's meeting with Snow, and Snow's asking him questions and whatever, and he says, Lenore, what? No, don't tell me. Let me guess. D. That's a tough one. None of the usual suspects, but they so rarely are. I can think of plenty prefaced by deep or dark, deep blue, dark green, but that's not how they work. Perhaps something in nature, like amber or ivory, daffodil, dandelion, diamond. No, that's no color at all, really. All right, I'm stumped. Lenore what? He found the flint striker, and it's got an inscription on the back, and it's signed LD. And obviously he knows about Covey and the Covey practices, so he's like quizzing him in a very weird way. And he gives him an ultimatum for the behavior that he has shown since arriving in the Capitol, and says that you can either die a slow death, agonizing death, or a quick death, and depending on how you behave is what we're going to decide to do, because I'm in control of everything, remember that. So he says, on the good side, with you out of the picture, Lenore, Dove, and your family should be free to enjoy long and happy lives, because they're going to kill Haymitch. He's like, you're dead. You're not winning this thing. I'm killing you. But your family will be alive and well. And we know Haymitch does win, and the family is not alive and well. And that is how he becomes an alcoholic. We know that from the original Hunger Games. And then that chapter concludes with us learning that Luella is not dead, per se. They took some random girl from some random district, we're assuming 11, based on her bread choices, and turned her into a Luella stand-in, and like implanted listening devices in her, so that the people of Panem don't know what happened to Luella, like the real Luella. So, always manipulative, always thinking ahead. Because I had made that comment like, oh, they're just going to let 3 tributes from 12, they're not going to replace her. Well, they kind of do, but also kind of don't. And then back in the barracks, they're sleeping, and they hear a knock on the door, and it's Beatty, and Beatty's come to talk to Haymitch. The way that like this, like the thought behind this, talking about breaking the arena and like how can they stick one to the Capitol, and Haymitch asks, yes, just tell me what I have to do, what breaks the machine. And Beatty says, time, usually. With it comes fatigue, wear and tear, erosion, creep. But we don't have the luxury of time, so we'll need a different approach. Sometimes Suzanne Collins, well, a lot of the times, has very profound things to say about our current society, or that mirrors our current society really, really well. And yeah, I just really liked that sentiment. Apparently Lenore has a secret. This is why she hates Maisley, but mostly because I know her secret and she hates being at my mercy. What's that mean? It means how come she's got orange paint on her fingernails when she shows up to play for the mayor's birthday party? It could be orange and not like paint. Some kind of ingredient in making something illegal. People in the Capitol lick toads to get a high. That's disgusting. We also get an Effie appearance in this book. Wait a second. Effie is the big sister that we were just talking about, who knows all of the people on the council board or the university school board and who made the new amazing spring fling dance or whatever it was. She is, I can't ever pronounce her name, Prosperina's older sister. I always forget this, but The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is actually the 10th Hunger Games. And I always forget that it's not the first. And that's the year that they introduced betting, sponsors, and the drones to deliver goods. Obviously all because of Snow being a game maker. And on the first quarter quell, the 25th games, is when the districts were forced to choose their own tributes rather than relying on the reaping, which I feel like I didn't know that. Also, where the term "may the odds be ever in your favor" was coined was during the 25th annual games. Also the first time that the cornucopia made its appearance. So I feel like we're getting things like backstory filled in on how the games work in a way that we didn't get in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, in my opinion. We also learn that they had used a bombed out sports arena for the first 10 years, which we knew from the other book. And then after that, they began to move from like place to place for arenas, which were other wild settings or bombed out towns and such. And then the 25th games is the first year that they built a brand new arena. And then from 25 onward, every year they would build an arena. Honestly, that's the kind of backstory that I was hoping for. I had to read this line twice because I was a little confused, but District 5 calls an emergency meeting in the green room as the sole remaining career district. Did District 5 used to be a career district? Because we know them as 1, 2, and 4. So apparently these two awful people, Drusilla, and Magno, are married. For 30 years and counting. It's a tax thing. Also, we find out, I really think that Plutarch is already being a little rebellious in this book. Like, I think there's some secret rebellious things happening, like in the background under the surface, that are going to tie really nicely into the original trilogy that we just like haven't learned about yet. Plutarch says, "Listen, Haymitch, I know you don't like me and you certainly don't trust me, but you should know that despite appearances, a desire for freedom is not limited to the districts, and your misfortune does not give you the right to assume so. I hope after tonight you'll consider this." So meaning even living in the capital, you're not free. You're not allowed to make all whatever choices you want. There are still like expectations and rules and chains of a different kind. Remember how I said I thought that Plutarch was involved in the rebel scheme and that he's already being rebellious at this point in the history of the Hunger Games? I was correct. He's giving information to Haymitch to help Haymitch blow up the arena, giving him the way that the sun rises and sets in the arena and where to look for the mutt portals so they can get down into the sub levels of the arena and blow up a water tank and flood the arena. He said to look for the flower berms. Our first really meaningful death comes in Wyatt from District 12, which is really sad. I can say I'm surprised. I can't say I predicted that. I did not expect him to be the first of our like core group to be dead. Also makes me increasingly sad to hear the way that Haymitch speaks about the games. Let me put you over here. He very much wants this to be the end of the Hunger Games. As the games must end here now. Every death reinforces the importance of the arena plot succeeding. And it just like really breaks my heart because we know for a fact that this is not where the games end. We know we have 25 more years of games, and while Haymitch is still obviously responsible for the games eventually ending, like he is definitely a very important cog in the machine to end the games, he has to wait 25 more years to see that. Quite the statement on the time that it can take for machines to break, which is a quote from earlier in the book that I really liked. Like, it can really take years of hard work and years of suffering to make the change that you want to see. And I don't know, that like really makes me sad. More sad than Wyatt dying. Okay, well, Lulu's dead now too. Oh my God. Oh my God. Carnivorous mutts tearing Ampert apart. I promised Speedy I would not let him suffer. I turned back to what I am meant to witness. A small white skeleton stripped clean to the bone. No flesh or clothing remains, only an axe at its right side, my knife at its left. You know it's coming because Beatty's trial doesn't exist in the trilogy, but oh my God, I'm unwell. So it seems like in bombing the water tank, he did cause some kind of glitch in the arena, and the forest kind of started having a malfunction, and the shield overhead went down and he could see the real sky. But then also the volcano, turns out the mountains of volcano erupted and there's lava everywhere. And there's also like poisonous gas now about in the arena. And according to Ampert, all the other tributes were on the mountain. Now they're all stuck in some lava. Okay, this is one of those callbacks to the original trilogy that I don't need in one of these books. I ditch my pack in a patch of Katniss and we take off toward the disturbance. I don't need to know that there's a patch of Katniss and swamp potatoes. It just feels a little cheap in my opinion, that's all I'm saying. It seems like Haymitch's relationship to Snow and the Game Makers is really similar to Katniss's. He's a incredible like liability to them and like causing them a lot of issues, but he must be resonating with the people in some kind of way that forces the Game Makers to keep him around, and he even says so here. Somehow I'm still alive. I have no idea why the Game Makers under Snow's direction have not destroyed me already. Could I possibly be so popular that they're keeping me around to please the audience? Very much rings similar to the story of Katniss and why they keep her around and how they use her to appease the districts, the population, the audience, and how they try to control her because she's like a huge, obviously, issue for them. What a nice through line. I can't remember exactly how Haymitch wins. I think it has to do with his axe, like throwing it at something, or I can't really remember exactly, but I think it has to do with the axe. But it's very interesting that they ran into Game Makers in the arena. They were fixing something, cleaning something. Never seen like them go into the arena before. Oh my God, that's right. He made it through the hedge and he's standing on a cliff and he's testing it how far down he would have to climb. And he kicks a pebble off the side of it and he hears it fall, but he never hears it land. And then it flings back up over the side of the cliff. He throws the axe over the side of the cliff and it bounces back and kills the other tributes. That is right. How does Maisily die? Oh no. So far I'm still the most traumatized by the carnivorous squirrels, honestly. Literally the next page answers my questions. She gets attacked by water birds with beaks like sword blades. And you know, I don't find it to be completely fair when these tributes are being murdered by these mutts that are like specifically programmed to kill that particular tribute. Like the squirrels had no interest in anyone but Ampert. These birds have no interest in anyone but Maisily. That feels targeted, because it is. And it also feels very manipulative of the games. You're not like doing anything to corral the tributes together or to push them to fight one another or to like cause dissent between them. You're just picking a tribute and murdering them because you don't want them to be a victor. You know, I just think it's not fair. And it is lazy. That's more than anything, it's lazy. Now I'm mad. So Welly gets attacked by the career Silka, and she gets decapitated. I don't remember The Hunger Games super well. I read it, you know, like way long time ago. But are the deaths in this one more gruesome than I remember from the other one? There we have the career from District 1 throwing the axe into the canyon and it rebounding back and hitting her in the face. I also didn't know that Haymitch had his guts basically removed from his body. Basically in a fight with each other over who is going to prolong their death the longest so that they can be crowned victor. Which is a very weird, who can live in agony longer so that we can be the winner of the games. The bomb that Haymitch had made to hopefully blow up the cornucopia, he actually ended up throwing into the force field. So he threw two things into the force field. Well, she threw the axe, he threw the bomb, and the Game Maker seemed very concerned about him throwing the bomb into the force field. They have Haymitch locked in solitary confinement after the games concluded because well, we don't really know what is going on yet, but they're showing him clips from the 10th annual Hunger Games, which is the one from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes book. And it says, one evening a haunting melody weaves through my dreams. I startle from sleep, calling Lenore Dove's name. The television glows on screen. A girl in a rainbow ruffle sings a familiar tune with unfamiliar words. She performs on a stage with a shabby backdrop before a Capitol audience in old-fashioned clothes. Great Aunt Messalina and Great Uncle Silius would fit right in. Her voice, that accent, the way those fingers command the guitar strings, a cubby girl for sure, but not mine. I didn't know if we were ever going to get like, because that is a games that they don't really televise or talk about or promote, because the victor is missing in action. No one knows where she went. Oh my God, and there's a tiny clip of Snow reaching out to her that they cut at the very end, and Hamish is like wondering who it could be. He's thinking maybe district partner or whatever, an earlier Flickerman, but they'd be 40 years older now if they're still alive. 40 years, not all that long after the dark days. If District 12's forgotten her, it's unlikely she's remembered here in the Capitol. No, wait, someone here remembers the cubby. Someone who knows how they name their babies and love their birds. Intimate personal knowledge. The information I attributed to Capitol informers would have an entirely different source. I do the math. 58 minus 40 is 18. President Snow would have been 18 during the 10th annual Hunger Games. The cubby girl would have been no older. The curly-headed man in the shadows that she reached out to, was it him? Oh my God. Oh, ho, 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 ho. In this moment when he realizes that it's likely Snow, that puts his girl, Lenore, in harm's way. Oh, Lenore Dove, what have I done to you? How will you pay for my surviving the Hunger Games? The next time that he sees Mags and Wirus as he's going up to the victor's celebration, Mags is in a wheelchair while a still mobile but distressed Wirus twitches her head about in a bird-like fashion. A steady stream of words spouting from her lips. So that's how they become these versions of themselves that we see Katniss meet. Something happened to them during this Hunger Games. So the arena is shaped like an eye with the 2 points at the end. The cornucopia is the pupil in the middle. And we get a rundown of the games in this montage, and Hamish is watching it and he's commenting on all of the ways in which it's been manipulated and edited and reorganized and reordered, and things specifically removed so that they could paint this version of the story that they wanted that didn't involve all these things that Hamish did. And it just is like a big commentary on propaganda, obviously, and how systems in power can manipulate people to do whatever they want and how easy it is for them to do that. So that was really interesting to read about, because obviously what Katniss knows of this Hunger Games is the Capitol version. So when we're learning about Hamish and we're learning about his games and what happened and how he won, we're hearing it from the Capitol side that Katniss would have seen. So there's a lot of things that are filling in blanks for us that we didn't know about before. You know, I have to say I'm proud of Suzanne Collins. She didn't put the hanging tree in here until page 351. You know what? Book Club often likes to point out that I didn't realize that the hanging tree was an actual tree when we did our live show for Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, because I didn't realize it was an actual tree, because when we see it in Katniss's Hunger Games, it's an actual gallows, not a tree. But Hamish does point out here, that she died in the hanging tree. I know this tree, it's real. My pop pointed it out to me. We have metal gallows in District 12 now, courtesy of the Capitol, but back in the day, many rebel died swinging from its branches. So you know what? He also pointed it out. So thank you, Hamish, for clarifying that it's not just me who didn't know that, but maybe others too. So Hamish's family is burned alive. They set fire to his house and burned his mom and his brother alive. That is a special brand of cruelty. So they bury Hamish's mom, brother, the 3 tributes, and then Wyatt's dad. What a heavy, heavy day. So those candies aren't from him. So the cubby apparently buried their dead in the woods, not in the graveyard, and there is a slate there for Lucy. even though some maintain to this day she's a living child. You guys are in the way. He wakes up in an alley with orange spray paint on the walls. No capital, no hanging tree. No capital, no reaping. Orange spray paint. Like that on Lenora Dove's fingers. I feel like we're learning so many tidbits of why Haymitch is how Haymitch is. Being why, like, he's a recluse. He's like the town drunkard, and we like, beyond just being a drunk, like, he's purposely pushed everybody away so that he doesn't make any more friends. He doesn't have any more loved ones. There's nobody left in his life for the capital to use against him. Kind of similar to what Joanna does. I also like get the meaning of the name of the book in Lenora Dove. I keep wanting to call her Lenora. Lenora Dove promises Haymitch to not let another sun rise on the reaping. We do see the Everdeens, and the Everdeen name is mentioned, but I did not put this together until right now. So Haymitch is wandering through the woods looking for the grave of Lenore Hope. I wanted to call her that because that's the name of a character in another book that I recently read, Lenore Dove. Looking for the grave of Lenore Dove, and it says, Burdock comes, though, appearing out of the mist, his leather jacket fastened against the frost, the bow in his hand, a brace of wild turkey at his hip. That's Katniss's dad. Her dad's name is Burdock. That's the leather jacket that gets left to Katniss. Stabbed to the heart. Oh, crazy that when the victory tour comes around and Effie comes back to fetch Haymitch, she says, I'm so sorry about your family's accident. And then your girl's appendicitis right after. Tragic. Ay, 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 ay. Plutarch is also the reason that Effie gets her job, because the previous stylist, Drusilla, falls down an escalator, and Magno, what happened to him? Was fired for negligence, and then Plutarch recommends Effie. Wow, 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 wow. Maybe one day, but we can't any of us do it alone. You demonstrate a lot of nerve and intelligence in that arena. We need your help. We do want you. You shook up the capital, both figuratively and literally, with that earthquake. You were capable of imagining a different future, and maybe it won't be realized today. Maybe not in our lifetime. Maybe it will take generations. We're all part of a continuum. Does that make it pointless? No, Haymitch, we need someone exactly like you. Luckier or with better timing, having an army at their back wouldn't hurt. If we can't find one, we'll have to build one. But obviously, finding one's easier. Oh my god, he calls Katniss sweetheart because Katniss has braids, and the braids remind him of Luella's braids. And, you know, that was his sweetheart. Luella was his sweetheart, and she had braids, and Katniss has braids. That's really sad. About Katniss. She's not an easy person. She's like me, Peeta always says, but she was smarter than me, or luckier. She's the one who finally kept that sun from rising. Handle it. Oh my God. Heartbreaking. My heart is broken. So I finished Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I have so many thoughts that I don't really know how to even articulate them to you in a concise, like, manner here. We did our live show for the book yesterday. I'll link that on the screen if you're interested in hearing our thoughts. I would highly recommend going to watch it because I don't think I'll be able to, like, adequately summarize that 1 hour conversation here as like a summary point for the book. I think I ultimately settled on the book being a 4 out of 5 stars. We had kind of a variety of ratings, but like not so much. A lot of people gave it a really high 4. Mari gave it a 3. I think she has some very valid points, but I don't know if I agree. A complaint for her in the book was that it was like hitting too closely beat for beat to the Hunger Games, that we were like essentially following the same story from Haymitch's perspective. And she found that to be like redundant and unnecessary. I'll agree that this is what was happening, but she just didn't like the execution of it. I think that we're following Haymitch and Katniss in these 2 books, going through very similar life moments. Like they're both from District 12. They're both from like the poorer portions of District 12. They both are without a father figure. They both have younger sibling. What motivates Katniss going into the games is saving her younger sister. What motivates Haymitch is a girlfriend. And I agree that like the girlfriend didn't pull at my heartstrings or like make the same impact that following like that Prim did. Because again, like we don't meet Prim for very long in the book before she gets reaped. but we just like feel that emotional moment. And I wonder if like part of it is more of like the movie, like the emotional scenes that the actors played in the movie, if that's what like gives that scene so much life. Like, did I feel that way in reading the book the first time before seeing the movie? I don't know. These two people have very similar life paths, and like how different their lives go based on circumstances in the world that were like kind of out of their control. Like Haymitch doesn't actually get reaped, which was like the first moment in the book that like subverted my expectations and that we kind of veered off course. Katniss also doesn't really get reaped. She volunteers and he gets reaped illegally. So like they both end up in the games for different reasons other than like their name being pulled. But then Haymitch's name is the last name pulled ever in the Hunger Games. I liked seeing that like these two characters who are so similar, and they tell us repeatedly in the original trilogy how similar that they are, and that's why they're able to communicate so effectively or like understand each other, is that they're so similar. They're both chosen for this rebellion, and one succeeds and one doesn't, and like what that does to them individually as people afterwards. I love that this book planted backstory that the rebellion has been happening for decades. Like it wasn't something that just, oh, Katniss did something a little rebellious, I guess it's time for a revolution. No, those seeds were being planted for decades, and then she just happened to be the tipping point. The last grain on the scale was the situation in which it worked, because it's obvious that they've tried this with many other victors in the past. Haymitch being one of them, potentially Annie, because her games also flood. And like, as they continued to make these efforts to create revolution and kept failing, eventually we get to Katniss, who succeeds. And I just loved that this returned Katniss to a person as being no one from nowhere with no real power, making a difference. Because when we got Ballad, there were so many nods to why Snow hates District 12 and like how they're almost more like these faded foes, and a lot of people didn't like that because like the point of Katniss is that she's supposed to be no one from nowhere who achieves these things, and like that's the point of like the average person in a society can achieve things. They're important just as much as like anyone else. Anyone could be the final grade on the scale kind of idea. I felt like Ballad took that away, and so I really liked that this brought it back, that like no, that is still the sentiment. And it felt like she was course correcting, like, oh, I made a mistake. And people did not respond well to it. And I need to course correct and really underline the fact that yes, Katniss is no one from nowhere. And yes, she made a big splash. And yes, she made rebellions and made revolution. And that is what I want my readers to think when they go out into the world, that they are also capable of creating change. This is like a nice midpoint in between Ballad and the original trilogy, because we are much more civilized obviously than Ballad. Like Ballad, they had just introduced like drones and the gambling aspect and some of the more entertainment quality moments to the games. The last year that it took place in a sports stadium before it moved to like other locations, it was still very much like this is so prevalent and so recent in our history that this is still just like punishment. Then we get to Katniss's games where we've forgotten that this is like punishment and is now more just purely entertainment. Or at least the general public has forgotten that this is supposed to be punishment, and they've desensitized themselves. Here we have some careers established. They're like on trains now. They have some bunk options, but they're not in these lavish hotels yet. Gaining speed to getting closer to what Katniss's games look like, but we still have some like rudimentary elements, like the fact that the chariots fall apart. They lose a tribute before they even get into the arena. What they do in response to that, because obviously they can't have an incorrect number of tributes in the arena. So how do they get around that issue? I loved all of the character cameos of Wyrus and Beatty and Mags, younger Plutarch, seeing him still being this diabolical mastermind because he's such a great foil to Snow, and the way that Haymitch is like a great foil to Katniss because he came from a wealthy house the same way that Snow did, but the Snow family fell into poverty during the Dark Days, whereas the Plutarch Heavensbys were able to work through that. And they're still rich and they're still powerful, whereas Snow had to obviously manipulate and murder a lot of people to get that same power and wealth back. His family didn't survive those times. I still am not a huge fan of the cubby. It doesn't have the same grit to it or like grounded in reality-ness. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the costumes. I think the issue is that Lucy Gray is a manic pixie dream girl, was there to further the plot of Snow, who was there to create excuses for why Snow is a bad person. Like he needed to be scorned by a woman or like, you know, like some stupid reason to become a serial killer. Whereas Snow could just have been a bad person and we could have been introduced to the cubby in other ways. But I think because they're used as like this plot device in Snow's story, I just don't like it. And so the fact that Haymitch's love interest, Lenore Dove, is also cubby and like we're very much still enmeshed in like cubby values and things, and Haymitch is still like seeing things through the eyes of the cubby, that I didn't like it. I still don't like them, and I think it's purely the way it was introduced in Ballad and how she felt like an unflushed out character who was, again, only there for Snow. And then I also just like really didn't like the way she was portrayed in the movie. An old character that we did not see that I would have loved to see would have been Tigress, because Tigress is supposed to be a stylist. And Snow is 58 in this book, I think. And so she's definitely a stylist. I would assume by that time she's about the same age. Where is she? What is she doing? This one is from Barnes & Noble and it has like a Q&A with the author at the end. And they mentioned the fact that Tigress is not mentioned in the book and whatever she was up to, it must be good. So that makes me wonder if we will get like some kind of Tigress story. I really enjoyed it. I really had a great time. This is leaps and bounds better than Ballad. I'm so excited for the movie because it'll obviously be a movie adaptation. And I can't wait to see how somebody other than Woody Harrelson does Haymitch, because even in this book I was picturing Woody Harrelson even though he's like way too old to be 16. I really love the whole story about like propaganda as well, and how we don't even know in the original trilogy that we're also being fed propaganda, because we're learning about it from Katniss's perspective, and we don't know that Katniss is an unreliable narrator. We don't know that she was fed lies about this games and how Haymitch behaved in the games, and like learning that it was rigged and it was painted in a specific light to create this specific storyline. And it's like the beginning of them manipulating storylines and footage to push a specific narrative. Makes you think that a lot of things that Katniss tells us in the trilogy is probably misinformation. And not that she knows that either, because she's just reiterating what she's learned, and like how timely and appropriate that conversation is for our actual world. I just like really enjoyed it. I feel like Suzanne Collins always has such a great pulse on society and on what is happening in our current climate, and it just like transcends into her book so well, and really like is a micro study of our society. And I just really enjoy it. I really like things that she says in her books. I still feel like I've missed the point of Ballad. So Ballad aside, I don't know if I missed the point or if Suzanne missed the point, but one of us missed it. I really felt like this got back to the roots of what Hunger Games is saying and like feels to read. Tell me your thoughts and feelings for this book in the comments down below. I'd love to know what you thought of it. If you'd like to follow me anywhere else, I am on Instagram and Blue Sky, and you can come follow me over there. Until next time, I will talk to you very soon. Bye!